This is the Pocket Go. It was released back in 2019, which might as well be the Jurassic era. Can this ancient technology hold up to modern retro gaming standards in 2022? Well, that's what we're gonna find out today. Oh hey, hi there, I'm TechDweeb. If you're new here, welcome. I make videos about retro emulation devices, PC hardware, all sorts of gadgets, and I try to give good info and advice, but it usually ends up in a bunch of nonsense. I got into retro handheld emulation devices because of the advice of a friend. He gave me this. It's this crappy GBA emulation thing. It doesn't work very good, but he gave it to me for free to try out, and I actually had some fun with it. And if it weren't for this friend talking me into getting into these sorts of devices, I probably never would have bought my first real retro handheld, the LDK, which I loved. And it started me down a path of playing retro games and looking at the latest hardware and buying things that I liked and eventually making YouTube videos on them for you dweebs. This was my friend Boris, by the way. Have I told you about my friend Boris? Boris is from Ukraine. He lived in a cabin in the woods and his parents were woodcutters and doll makers. When the Cold War broke out, it drove his family to flee from the motherland in search of a new home. They eventually found themselves in Canada and they thought it was nice, so they stayed. Boris grew up on the mean streets of Toronto, Ontario, where only the toughest kids survive. He learned martial arts so that he could defend innocent children from the notorious Canadian gangs that prowled the Torontonian streets, and he always had a soft spot for Nintendo games. He would play Nintendo with the Russian immigrant children and teach them how to speak Canadian and how to knife fight. Boris is the picture of a thug with a heart of gold, and he secretly wanted to be an artist. That's how I met him, actually. We both went to the same art school. I was scared of him at first. He had scars and was always practicing his punching and kicking and would mutter what sounded like Russian death threats under his breath. But once I got used to his accent and got to know him, I found we had a lot in common. We both loved playing with toys, we both loved cartoons, and we both loved old Nintendo games. We would hang out in his mom's basement, playing Nintendo games and eating strange Russian food. Fast forward 20 or so years and we're still best buds. He helps me by beating up people who make fun of me, and I help him with tech stuff. And that brings us to this. In this box is an old school BitBoy Pocket Go, and it belongs to my good buddy Boris. He needed help fixing it, and he said, "When you fix, you should make a video for the YouTube about it." So, this one's for you, Boris. Now, I know you guys like unboxings, but I don't have the original box, so we'll just make do with what Boris gave us. Let's see what we have in here. In the box, we have the Pocket Go, safely stored in one of Boris's socks for some reason, and it comes with everything we need. A USB cord, a charging cord, I guess. Oh, and a Russian nesting doll. These things are super fun. Oh my gosh, look, there's so many. Oh man, I'm having a great time here. I could do this all day. Alright, enough of that. Now, as for what was wrong with the Pocket Go, I think it was just a corrupt SD card. It wouldn't boot, just a black screen. I had another product by the same company that made this, the original BitBoy, so I figured I'd try the SD card from that out first, and yeah, it worked. Sorta. It was working fine, but it was like upside down. But at least I knew it worked, so I got a new SD card and flashed the latest custom firmware from the BU GitHub. I'll include a link to the instructions and the firmware image in the description below. You just gotta flash the SD card with the image in Windows and copy over your ROMs and BIOS files, and you're good to go. And it worked great, no issues at all. So let's do this. I'm going to review this thing as it is right now in 2022. We'll tour the hardware, check out the software, the compatibility, play some games, and we'll see if it's a viable choice for a retro gaming handheld today. Starting with the hardware, as you can see, it's actually pretty small. It's very pocket friendly. I never really cared for this form factor. It's a personal preference thing, but I always prefer the vertical format, like the original Game Boy. And pretty much all the retro emulation devices I buy are in this vertical format. I made a few videos about this topic actually, but I know that's not for everyone. Lots of people like the horizontal format, so I won't fault it for that. The screen is pretty small. Maybe I'm spoiled by my favorite handheld, the BU Mini, but this thing feels like it has huge bezels compared to the size of the screen. The technology has come a long way since this thing was released, though. It's not terrible by any means. It just feels a bit more old school. The D-pad is meh. I don't like it. I'm not good at describing this stuff, but it feels a little too firm, but it also feels a little bit sticky. And that's not just because Boris probably spilled borscht on it. It's not bad, it's just not good, if that makes sense. The buttons feel the same. They're kind of firm, but when they bottom out, it feels like they stick a little at the bottom. Then they kind of pop up after they're fully released. Again, not terrible, just not great. This'll get you by though. Sort of like the screen. I feel like I'm just spoiled by the amazing devices that we have access to these days. The Pocket Go was from an era where they were just figuring out the best way to do things. And it works well enough, to be honest. Start and select on the left and a single mono speaker on the right. Shoulder buttons up top, along with a micro SD card slot and a reset button. AV out and headphone jack with a micro USB slot. And look at this. It looks like a little face. How cute is that? Power switch over on this side and a volume wheel that is upside down because you scroll down to turn it up, which is dumb, but whatever. And that's it. It feels great in the hand. It's very well built. It has a good weight to it. Not heavy, but it doesn't feel cheap. It really reminds me of the old GBA Micro, which is an amazing old system. Actually, I think Boris has one of those too, if I'm not mistaken. Let's turn it on and check out the screen. Now, the LCDs on these older handhelds, they don't play nice with cameras. They're hard to film. So if the screen looks terrible, that's why. It looks pretty good to my eyes in real life, but it just doesn't look great on camera. So just keep that in mind. It's a decent enough screen. It feels a little on the small side, but honestly, for the kinds of portable and retro games you'll be playing on this thing, it's totally fine. A bit of backlight bleed, as you can see in the corner, but Boris has owned this device for a few years now, so who knows if it's just an issue with his or these things in general. It has good brightness, and it's crisp. I'm very familiar with this type of screen because I'm pretty sure it's the same type of screen that I have on my BitBoy, which is the retro handheld that I've played the most. The Miu Mini has replaced it in my affections, but I put hundreds of hours into the BitBoy. I love that thing. Let's hear how it sounds. That's not great, but not terrible. It's kind of tinny, but it's loud enough, and it sounds clear without much distortion. I guess I'll give that a pass. So that's the tour. Next up, we'll check out the software. I'm pretty sure this is the same custom firmware that was released for the POW Kitty V90. I made a video guide and review on this firmware on the V90. I'll include a link to that video below if you want to check it out. I see how to install it. It's pretty simple to use. You can use the shoulder buttons to switch the categories. We have applications like file browsers and Linux stuff, emulators, which is what you'll mostly be using to play your games, games/mods, which is like ports and stuff, and settings, which is used for changing settings and powering off. It's an okay system. It's a little awkward, but it works well enough. So with all that out of the way, let's get to the good stuff, the games. I'm gonna test a bunch of random stuff in no particular order, and we'll see what the gaming experience is actually like on this thing. Starting off, as always, with the best retro game of all time, Burger Time on the Game Boy. I freaking love this game, and it works great here. It initially had the bezels around the outside, but with this emulator you could change the ratio so that it runs full screen. It's a little stretched, but I prefer it like this, and it feels good on this screen. It's a small device, and the screen is small, but so is the GBA Micro, and that was a very well-loved system. I think this is a good-sized screen for like old retro systems like the NES, and games designed for small screens like Game Boy and GBA games. Here's some Atari 2600, working very good. I've actually come to really like playing Atari games on these retro handhelds. I did have an Atari back in the day with like 50 games, but there were so many games for the Atari, and I've actually discovered several really good ones. And the graphics on these games are not fancy or detailed, obviously, so they work just fine on a smaller screen like this. NES is good to go. Here I am playing Gunsmoke. This is a great game. I remember renting it when I was a kid. My neighbor wanted me to help him choose a retro arcade stick so that he could play Gunsmoke. I helped him choose the Pandora's box. I made a whole video about getting that thing so that he could play Gunsmoke. I guess I'll link to that below if you want to check it out. The NES plays really well on this this thing. I can see myself enjoying going through my old favorite NES games like Cobra Triangle, 1943, all the Mario games, Darkwing Duck, Mega Man, Micro Machines, all those good old Nintendo games. Let's try some Game Boy Color, which was basically like a portable NES. This is Mega Man Extreme 2, running just fine. I like the way it looks on this screen actually, and I think Game Boy Color games are pretty much the perfect level of detail for a screen this size. I didn't have a Game Boy Color. I skipped that generation of portable consoles. I had an original Game Boy and then the Game Boy Pocket, and then I didn't have a portable until the GBA SP. So I'm kind of in the dark about the best Game Boy Color games. Oh hey, if any of you guys have some good Game Boy Color games to suggest to me, please let me know. I'd love to try some of the best ones that I didn't know about. Speaking of handhelds that I didn't own, here's the Gamegear. Or is this Sega Master System? I can't tell. This emulator runs both of those. Well, I didn't have a Gamegear or a Master System, so I don't know about what games are good on either. I'm familiar with this game though, the Desert Strike. I played it on the SNES. I actually always liked helicopter games for some reason. I don't know why. I don't care about helicopters, but helicopter games are just fun to me. This one's running fine here. The game isn't great. It's not nearly as good as the SNES version, but it's running good as far as I could tell. Moving along to Sega Mega Drive, or Sega Genesis, as we called it here in Canada. Yet another system I didn't own, but I did have a best friend who had this, and also my cousin. So I played a lot of Sega games back in the day. I remember really liking all the Sonic games, the Disney games like Lion King and Aladdin. What else? Shinobi. Oh, my cousin had the Jurassic Park game, and I like that because you could play as a human or a raptor. That was pretty sweet. Echo the Dolphin, Mortal Kombat. I think there was a Contra game, if I'm not mistaken. And lots of other ones. Those are the ones I remember off the top of my head. Sega games run great on this device because it's easy to emulate, and the screen is basically the exact resolution of the Sega Genesis, so the games look super crisp with no stretching or scaling or anything. I think if you like Sega, you'll really like the Pocket Go. And of course, we need to try some SNES. This was one of my favorite games, Jurassic Park. It wasn't the best game, but it was a good game. It was one of my favorites because I was nuts about Jurassic Park. Seriously, you have no idea how nuts I was about Jurassic Park. I saw it in the theater and it blew my mind. I had a ton of toys, posters. I even read the novel, even though I was only like 10 years old. I pre-ordered the VHS for it with my own money. I was so excited to own it. I was like dreaming of it. When it finally arrived, my mom brought it to me at school, and I told her it was the happiest day of my life. True story. I've had some pretty happy days since then, but even still, getting Jurassic Park on VHS, that'll be a hard one to top. Oh, and I suppose I should talk about the performance. Yeah, this is running great, no issues. The vast majority of SNES will run problem-free, but not everything will run perfectly. There's a few hard-to-emulate games, you know, like Yoshi's Island and the 3D-ish stuff like Star Fox, as you can see. PC Engine, which we called Turbographx 16 here in Canada, is another system that I didn't own, but I really like playing it now. I've discovered lots of good games, but this one's my favorite, Devil's Crush. I just really freaking love pinball, and this is an amazing pinball game. It's also another system that's easy to emulate, so you should have no problem with the entire library of PC Engine games. Game Boy Advance is probably the system I'd be playing the most on this device. I've said it many times, but I'll say it again here, why not? The GBA is, in my opinion, the pinnacle of the retro gaming era. It was limited to mostly pixel-based graphics, similar graphics quality to like an SNES, maybe a little bit better, but very similar. So most of the games are all pixel-based, but it was a much more recent system than most of the older pixel-based systems, so the games themselves are built with much more modern game design sensibilities and more sophisticated game mechanics. Some of my favorite retro games are on this system, and there are a ton of amazing games for it. Lots of updated remakes of older games, lots of games that push the hardware, lots of role-play games, strategy games, just lots of good games. Not everything will run perfectly. As you can see here, this crappy Duke Nukem game is giving me problems, as it usually does. but most stuff will run great. And considering this is pretty much the same size as the GBA Micro, it feels really natural to play Game Boy Advance games like this. As for MAME, well, it'll be hit or miss. I don't find the MAME emulators on lots of these devices have great compatibility, but that might just be due to my own incompetence in finding good ROM sets. You need to be a freaking NASA rocket scientist to figure out MAME ROM sets, I swear. I have a small collection of easy to run MAME games on here, and they work fine, but your mileage may vary depending on which ROM set you use. The games look great on this little screen, I can vouch for that. Final Bird Alpha is my preferred way to play arcade games. They just seem to work much more consistently. Here's Dodonpachi. It's a shoot-em-up game that I like. I actually really like vertical shoot-em-ups on these devices. I just love vertical shmups in general. It looks a little weird playing a game like this. I'll be the first to admit that. But they play so well. And there's so many good vertical shmup games out there that you could play on these retro handhelds. If you like vertical shmups, then a device like this will serve you well. Alright, now on to the million-dollar question. What about PlayStation? Well, it's complicated. There are lots of games that'll run well on this thing. I found this PDF from someone who tested a ton of games and found out which ones work perfect, which ones need specific settings, which ones don't run perfectly but are playable, and which ones don't work at all. I'll include a link to this document in the description below. The short version is that most of the easy to emulate stuff runs fine, pretty much all the 2D stuff and lots of the easy to run 3D stuff. Gran Turismo ran okay. It was a little choppy, but it was totally playable, to be honest. There's lots of stuff that doesn't run perfectly but is still playable. I tested Final Fantasy VII, and the performance was okay. If it was an action game, it would probably be annoying, but since it's a turn-based RPG, it felt totally playable. I'd have no problem playing through like this. And yeah, all the 2D PlayStation stuff is gonna run fine. No problems. And since there are so many really good PS1 games that'll run on this thing, I think you'll have a great time. As long as you understand that maybe your favorite game won't run, and some stuff will be a bit of trial and error. But that's pretty much par for the course with these retro handhelds, especially these older handhelds. So as long as you're okay with doing a bit of troubleshooting and tinkering, I think you'll have a good time with PS1. I know I did. So where does that leave us? Well, the Pocket Go was a great device back in 2019, but things have changed a lot since then. We've had amazing, cheap devices like the Powkiddy V90 come along, offering us the best bang for the buck. We've had higher-end luxury devices like the Ambler NIC 280V. We've had more powerful, affordable devices like the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. And of course, now we have my favorite device, the Miu Mini. But does that mean that the BitBoy Pocket Go no longer has a place? Well, no. It's still a good device. It plays games. It plays all those old Game Boy Color, NES, Sega, almost all your GBA, SNES, even some PlayStation. You can have a lot of fun with this thing. But like I always say, what really matters is what you get for the price. I don't think you can buy these things new anymore. I can't find them for sale and in stock anywhere, so if you're looking to get one, you're probably looking on the secondhand market. Compared to the original price of 50 bucks, and considering that you could get something like the Powkiddy V90 for 40 bucks, I would say that this device here, the BitBoy Pocket Go, would be a good choice if it was $30 or less. It's not a good competition with the $40 and up handhelds, but it's still a competent 16-bit era retro gaming handheld. And even at $30, I think you'll have a lot of fun on your hands for the low cost of entry. Obviously, if you have more to spend, you should get something more modern. But if a Pocket Go comes along for whatever reason, and the price is right, and you're looking to get into retro emulation handhelds, then I say why not? And I'm pretty sure that Boris would agree with me. And that brings us to the end. I bet a few of you guys have a Pocket Go. What do you think of it? Do you still play with it? What other devices have you had over the years? Give your all-time favorite retro handheld a shout out in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you guys down there. And while you're down there, click the thumbs up button if you liked the video, or the thumbs down button if you didn't. Subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos. As always, I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.